Welcome to The Hour. I'm Steve Castile, and today we're doing part 2 of a series of an incredible interview with James Moore. If you tuned in last week, I don't have to say anything else. Stay tuned.
You are watching The Hour, time that makes the difference. The United Methodist Hour is made possible by the generous prayer and financial support of viewers like you. Thanks for watching. And now, here's your host, Steve Castile.
Welcome back. We're here in Moore's Bike Shop again this week to continue telling an incredible story of heartbreak and healing, of challenge and learning that there's not one of us that will view that hadn't been affected by this. And so we ask that you stay tuned and continue to listen to the story of Jim Moore and his family and his son Jeffrey. But before we do that, we want to take a minute and let Keith Tonkel lead us into the International Lesson Series.
A little girl was talking to her daddy and said, "Daddy, I understand about all this space exploration, that you have to go a long piece out there." She said, "Daddy, how far is it from Earth to the planet Venus?" And he thought for a minute and he said, "Honey, it's a very, very long way." Silly, I guess. But you know, sometimes we talk about being Christians and Christian discipleship and forget the fact that those two things can be very far from one another. In our study today, we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 1, and we'll be beginning with verse 16. The distance between Christian knowledge, knowing something about God, knowing something about the saving power of Jesus Christ, is infinitely different. There is a tremendous distance between knowledge and discipleship. Notice how practical Jesus is at this point. In verse 16 of chapter 1, Mark's Gospel. Now as he, Jesus, walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew his brother casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And Jesus said to them, "Come after me, and I will make you to become fishers of men." One of the amazing things about Jesus is that he is always coming to us in the ordinary events of life, in the commonplace experiences. When many of us think about religion, we think about pie in the sky, or we think about some abstract, far-off God, some God who's out there but who has so little to do with you and me and every day in the commonplace, but not Jesus. Not this Word of God made flesh that walks straight up to fishermen fishing and says, "Come after me." The commonplace revealing the eternal. And then in verse 18, and straightway they forsook their nets and they followed him. Now you see, that's how one finds the distance between Christian knowledge and discipleship being reduced. That's how you close the gap, okay? By not only hearing the word from Jesus, by not only knowing of the invitation, but by stopping what you're doing and making a response to that invitation. They forsook their nets straightway and they followed him. They stopped the thing that they were doing and began a new thing. So that Christian faith is not just knowing the right things about the Scriptures or about the God who is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but Christian life is translated into active daily discipleship. It's moving a new direction. You know, it's a very good question that the world is asking us, those of us who claim to be Christians, when they say, "How are you different from other people?" And we remember how Jesus in Matthew chapter 5 said, "What do ye more than others?" And so the Christian understands that it is not only knowledge of the truth, but doing the truth, the active walk of faith, the fellowship, if you will, the putting down of the old life and the taking on of the new. And in verse 19, when he had gone a little further, he saw James the son of Zebedee and John his brother, who were also in the ship mending their nets. And straightway he called them, and they left their father, Zebedee, in the ship with the hired servants, and they went after him. James and John are beautiful too, because James and John, sons of thunder, were people who were pretty rough and ready, but they too found themselves touched and smoothed and redirected by the power of him who comes to you and to me and to all of us and says, "Would you like something better? Then leave what you're doing and move away from just knowing into active fulfilling, life-blessing discipleship that will in turn make you a blessing to others. May God bless us as we seek out that kind of discipleship.
You know, every time we watch a classic episode of Keith, it stirs our hearts, and our hearts are going to continue to be stirred as we move into this program. First, stirred by Anthony as he shares with us another episode of Drawn to Christ. Let's watch.
Until I entered college, I spent my summers working on a shrimping boat. It was a tough job, sometimes dangerous, but always interesting. We would pull in the net after dragging it for a few hours to see what the catch would be. There were shrimp, hopefully, though not always. But there was always a lot of other things, fish of every kind, crabs, stingrays, eels, jellyfish, and everything else. There was always an element of adventure to see what the catch would bring. Jesus was a fisherman. He hung out with colorful characters and said that he was, in fact, fishing for men. Jesus cast a wide net, bringing all sorts of folks into his boat. His teachings tell us to do the same. I thought of Christ often during my times as a boy shrimping. So much of Scripture focuses around the water, and I could just see it out there. I would imagine Jesus calming the storm when the tide around our boat was a little rough. I would see Moses parting the waters. I would see Peter hopping out of his own boat and walking on the water with Jesus. Being there on our own boat was vivid and real. I could taste the salt water, smell the air, feel the breeze, and I could see Jesus. Are you looking for Christ? He's there if you look, casting his net, seeking relationship and communion with a varied host of characters. And he's still teaching us to do the same. I'm Anthony Thaxton. I'm drawn to the coast. I'm drawn to water. And I'm drawn to Christ.
Thanks, Anthony. You know, as we prepare to hear the next segment of our conversation with James Moore, I want to take you back if you weren't here last week. All of us have family stories. All of us have family issues. And one of the issues that's besetting not only our community, but our country is the issue of addiction. The faith-based community has really wrestled with its response to that. And to be truly honest, we've been woefully lacking. Too many times that disease is listed as some kind of sin, when in fact the persons involved are sick and need our love and grace, and their families need our support. As Jim and I have had this conversation, and his passion to do something about it has kind of met my dream and creativity, and the way it's affected our family, we've been drawn to take some steps, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Last week, Jim talked about his processing of his feelings and his anger and his frustration with some of the inadequacies in all the treatment processes and the responses that people have in the midst of this. And today he's going to talk about some of the steps he's begun to take to turn that anger into action, to take his experience and make it part of the road to recovery for those that are around him. Let's listen in.
The first thing that I decided to do when I wanted to become an advocate for those suffering from this disease that took Jeffrey was to go to DC for an event called Facing Addiction. And I checked in early at my hotel a few blocks from the White House. I had taken a shirt and had a print of Jeffrey's image put on the shirt, because I wanted other people there to know I was there for that reason, so that I could make connections with them and maybe learn from those that are further along in this than I was. So I check into the hotel, put on my shirt with Jeffrey's birth date and death date on it, and I walk down to the Washington Mall where this event's about to happen, and there are 5,000 other people milling about the mall waiting for this to begin. And I was stunned to see 5,000 other people had the same clever idea that I had of putting dead loved ones on their shirts. And what was so stunning was the number of people who had multiple family members on the same shirt. Multiple children, or a husband and a son. I was standing taking all that in, and out of the crowd, a young lady walks up to me and she smiles and she points to Jeff. And then she points to the young man on her shirt, and they bore a striking resemblance. And without a word, she held out a wristband that said simply, "Not one more." And then she walked off with the wristbands into the crowd. And this was 2.5 years ago. That mother's prayer of "not one more" has been shattered over 140,000 times since then. And so that's what I try to convey when I talk to groups, that this is happening so fast that we need to act quickly, we need to act effectively to try to change it. The most important thing I think that we can do is to eradicate the stigma so that those who are embarrassed can step forward quickly, step into treatment, and begin the road to recovery. If we can simply make it comfortable for them to step forward so they don't feel like they're going to shame their families. I remember when Jeff went to the hospital, to the ER. The next morning, I was with him in his hospital room. He was talking to his fiancée and trying to decide whether to do the detox for the next 5 days or check himself out and go right on back to school. He said, "Well, I guess I'm going to have to go to detox, or my family's just going to think I'm a junkie." And I did not realize at that time the shame that came with that image. But the worst thing about addiction is what it does to your image of yourself. It's the only disease I know that makes a person literally hate who they are. And so if one thing first can be accomplished, if we can simply change the way that we view this as a disease and not a moral issue, it would make it so much easier for people who are at any stage of this to step forward and get help. I find myself, when I talk to groups, family groups in recovery, there is always that one person that is a patient, a client in the facility, that will speak up at some point and say, "Thank goodness for Jesus. I've got Jesus. All I need is Jesus. Jesus will get me through this." And I deeply respect the importance of a faith to get through something as tough as this. It is my faith that has gotten me to this point. But my response is, if you had any other disease, would you not want to take full advantage of all of the medical facilities and knowledge that God has made available to us? And once I had an elderly man who was the father of one of the patients. All you need is church. You get in church, you're going to be okay. You know, you got to find your right way. God's going to take care of this for you. And my response to him was, respectfully, sir, if you were out in the woods in your tree stand and you fell out and you looked down and saw your bones sticking through your boots and your buddies come to rescue you, are you going to ask them to take you to church or take you to the ER? And there was no answer coming, but we both knew the answer. So absolutely, a faith is critical to be able to get through this, but also using the knowledge that we have and trying to expand on that, and just loving each other regardless of the behaviors that we see coming from this disease. When Jan and I would have these long evening talks, after the plates had been taken away, and I commented once about, isn't it amazing after Jeff died, how many people came up to us, people that we barely knew, and said, oh, that's in our family too, it's so widespread. And I would get so frustrated because I would say, then why did you never talk about it before? And then I realized that as a family, we were no different. We never spoke about it before. It was our secret, and we didn't even tell our immediate family members where Jeffrey was or what was going on. It needs to be something that we are comfortable talking about. We need to understand that it is not because of a moral issue. It is not because of bad behavior. It is not because of a sin. As long as we have those views, there's going to be a big gap in being able to do anything to effectively support these people as they go through this. There was a gentleman named Sam Snodgrass that was a heroin addict for 20 years, and Sam found long-term recovery. He put himself through pharmacology school, and he understands the brain. He's got a PhD. And Sam wrote a letter to families talking about what addiction is like. He said, imagine if you haven't eaten for 5 days, not just since breakfast or a few hours, but 5 days. What would you be thinking about? What would you be focusing on? He says it's that brain's drive, that focus, that makes everything else fall away to allow you to focus on what you absolutely have to have for the moment. He said, and that's what addiction is like for us. But once we get what we need, that cycle starts itself again and repeats itself every 4 or 5 hours. And that's all that we are focused on. And in that, we become people we are not. We do things we know are wrong. We do things that we would never do otherwise. And so if we can understand, and he says, and we don't understand that. So we can't explain it to you when you ask, because we honestly don't understand. We just think we're going to die if we don't follow this pattern time and time again. So I ask groups, knowing the answer when I speak, I said, how many of you were able to afford 5 days of detox because your church held a bake sale to raise funds for you? They smile at each other, and I said, how many of you are here in this facility for 30 days because your community held a 5K run? And they get it. And I said, your church holds these bake sales for every other immediate need that someone in their congregation or community has. Your community holds these events for every other disease that we're trying to combat, that we're trying to eradicate. Why not for this disease? And then I began talking to a friend of mine, and he said, why not? Why not do it? And so that's where the concept of the road to recovery came from. And I want to be able to go into these facilities in the very near future and not be able to use that example anymore, because I can point to a community where that took place and where that probably would take place on a regular basis.
You know, there are people who, when you sit in the room with them, you understand you're sitting with somebody who is an authentic difference maker. One of the themes we've been weaving and will be weaving into the show is that there are people who make a difference in the world, and James Moore is one of those. One of the things I'm excited to be a small part of as it's coming together is an event that'll happen on March 24th at Lake Thoreau, which is on the campus of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg. There'll be a combination of a long-distance bike ride, short-distance bike ride, cross-country bike rides, multiple running and walking events, along with a variety of agencies and groups of people who are truly engaging this addiction disease. It's entitled Road to Recovery. And the team that's pulling it together and planning is even now in the midst of polishing the last issues. We would love to invite you to be a part of it. We'll continue to bring you information from the show about the details of that. We'll post on our website the link that will let you register. But the end game is this: out of James's journey with Jeffrey, there has been a foundation created at the Pine Belt Foundation called Jeffrey's Fund. And it is his dream and our dream that as that fund grows, we'll begin to address a variety of what we see really challenging points for families in recovery. Number one will be, so many families don't have insurance that many times the folks who need the hospitalization and the treatment and the institutionalization and the processes don't have adequate funding. And it's our dream that we grow Jeffrey's Fund to the place where we can grant scholarships to those who cannot afford that treatment themselves. Another arena that we look to delve into is to create a children's initiative with this called I Can. And the cans will collect change that we will use to buy doses of Narcan, which is an incredible first response medication that saves the lives of those who are having overdoses. Police from across our state have received these through some grants, but part of our dream is what if everyone who left recovery could take home some doses of that to have, because this is such an insidious disease. There are other things that are going to bubble out of this, but it's just such an honor for us to be affiliated with somebody who has this vision and who's willing to drive this event. Please watch for more information, and we will keep you informed as this goes on. You know, speaking of formed, we're reminded that all of us have the capacity to make a difference. All of us have the capacity to use our gifts and graces to do something that matters. And LaToya tells us that every single week. Let's listen to what she has to say to us today.
Greetings! You know, one of the things I really enjoy doing is getting my nails done. Probably about 6 months ago, I started getting my nails done again. I used to get them done and then I stopped, and now I get them done again. And I'm gonna tell you, do you know why I really look forward to it? Yeah, I like having polished, professional looking, done nails, but more than that, it's so exciting to me that every 2 weeks, I get the opportunity to totally change something about myself. So I could go this time and I could get red nails, I could get my nails filed in a square shape. And when I go in 2 weeks, I can get brown nails and I can get them filed in a round shape. Now you say, well, what's so exciting about that? Well, you know what's exciting about that? It reminds me every time that I go that that's the way my life is every day. That's the way my life is every day. Every day that I wake up, God gives me the opportunity to change. I can be somebody totally different in the morning if I decide to be. If I decide I want to be something different or do something different, if I want to be better, if I want to be different, if I want to forgive myself for something that I held against myself for 20 years in the morning, I can change just like that when I wake up in the morning. God's mercies are new every day. And so every 2 weeks, by getting my nails done, I'm reminded about how many opportunities we have to change and to be something different. So, you know, if you're trying to figure out, well, how can I minister to people? I don't know how to minister to people. You practice changing. You practice being better and doing different. And you know what? When people talk to you about how they don't like something about themselves, how they don't like something about their lives, you talk to them and you let them know how you changed. You let them know they can change. If you don't like this thing about yourself, you don't have to be that way. You don't have to have your life be that way. Every day you let them know that they can change and they can do something different. And then you walk with them through that change. If you have a coworker that wants to do something different, you walk with them through that. You keep telling them, you keep encouraging them. Your life can be different, your life can be better. And then you walk with them through it every day. You take them to lunch and encourage them. That's a really great way that we can minister to people, because everybody wants to do something different. Everybody wants to be better in some way, and we can help people know that we can do that. Just going to sleep and waking up the next morning, we can decide to change. We can decide to be better. I'm so excited about this year because I know that I have 365 opportunities to change and to be better. I'm so excited. I hope that you'll share that with somebody else, because your ministry matters.
I'm sitting here in the bike shop, you know, you hear about a kid in a candy shop. I'm a man in a bike shop, seeing all these incredible vehicles, even this huge old high wheel, which I talked about that we'll show you later, just reminds us of the ingenuity of the human mind. Part of what we challenge you to do in this show is to use your mind, your heart, your soul, your spirit, your life through the direction of the Spirit and through God to make a difference. Because here at the Hour, we want to be time that makes a difference, that gets into the hearts of people who make a difference. And when all is said and done, we dream of everybody learning to live loved.